What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. So, I was just scrolling through the other day and I saw a specific Mystic Umbreon video, and this one was talking about a great Sinnoh team, but it had a Dustox on the thumbnail. And I thought, well, Dustox isn't a Sinnoh Pokemon, which is true, it wasn't introduced in Gen 4, but it could absolutely be found in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, as is common everywhere to find older Pokemon across various regions. So then that got me thinking, well, which Pokemon would perform best and thrive outside of the region in which they began? And of course, I don't mean variant forms or anything like that, but having the primary Pokemon showcase their capabilities somewhere you wouldn't quite expect, living their best life outside of their native location. Number 6. Lucario. There is of course the Lucario that you're gifted in X and Y that can Mega Evolve, and while that is cool enough, I'm not really talking about that one. I'm focusing on the Riolu that you can catch in the Unova region in Black and White 2. You can walk up to the ranch and capture one of these Pokemon before the first gym, which is extra good because this gym happens to specialize in the normal type, meaning that you can use fighting attacks to destroy Cheren. And it may not be the most likely, but since Riolu does evolve through friendship, that means that you could get a Lucario relatively quickly, and possibly even before the second gym, which just so happens to be the poison type. So the new steel that's added from evolution would make you totally immune. So being invaluable in the first 2 gyms is good enough already, but of course a strong steel type would be able to put in work against the bug type gym, and only take neutral hits from the flying threats throughout the region, and even resist the dragon gym and champion. That means that basically a Route 1 pick is useful for the entirety of the game, and puts it well above the Riolu line in the Sinnoh games, since you can't even find one until you go to Iron Island and talk to Riley, which is like the 6th gym, which is a world of difference when you have to hatch it from an egg. Maybe you could argue the mysterious and sparse presentation in Gen 4 created a better atmosphere around Lucario, but he's not a legendary Pokemon, he doesn't need that, and my least favorite part about the legendaries is not being able to actually use them in the game. So getting such a reliable Pokemon so early really makes it reach its full potential much sooner than trying to play catch-up from level 1 in any of the Sinnoh games. Number 5. Wurmple. I have to concur with the Mystical Umbreon and say that Wurmple and its evolutions are better suited for other regions besides their native Gen 3. That's not to say that they are poor choices there, but the sheer variety of options in the early stages of the Hoenn region sort of drowns out the bugs with a shared dynamic that we've already seen before, and then they especially get crowded out when you get into the later stages of the game and a butterfly and a moth don't really cut it anymore. However, when used in Sinnoh, it's a different story. You can pick up a Wurmple in Eterna Forest, which is technically later than last time, but that's actually a good thing, rather than getting them just before a Rock-type gym where Beautifly will be weak and Dustox will not be very effective. You can find them just before the Grass gym where their added Flying and Poison types would be of much greater value, not to mention both of those types resisting the next Fighting-type gym, along with some Psychic-type coverage attacks to boot. Unless it's Platinum, I guess, with Fantina, but it's not like they're helpless there, and they've even got their own unique healing moves. I'm not gonna pretend like you would always take them to the Elite Four every time, or that you couldn't have done that before in Hoenn, but with the problem of every Sinnoh team looking the same, it's far easier to slot them in here where options are more limited, and have the Wurmple evolution lines be effective in some way, promoting them further than their home region ever could. Number 4. Skarmory. Speaking of Hoenn, Skarmory is a good Pokemon and a great concept to introduce the Steel type in general, but that's kind of the problem. It's such a cool and useful Pokemon that it's a disgrace that they made it basically impossible to find in Johto at all. You can only catch it on the route after the final gym at a 5% encounter rate as a version exclusive. I don't know why they were ashamed of this razor-bladed raptor, but I guess they learned because next time in Ruby and Sapphire, they prominently featured it on Route 113. Well, it is true that it is still a 5% encounter rate, so it's not like you're gonna constantly be seeing it, but as one of only 3 Pokemon to live up here in the soot, you are far more likely to run into it. Now, this is actually right before the Fire-type gym, but you can weather that storm and then go to take your own Skarmory to face Winona, and then you can use it to resist the Psychic Twins as well while hitting their rock types with super effective Steel. While maybe not the most suited for the Hoenn region's makeup, being able to get a Skarmory after the third gym instead of the last one means that you can actually have a chance at using one and loving it the whole time. And honestly, many players legitimately thought that Skarmory actually was a Hoenn Pokemon because they never even saw one in the Johto games. So I think that perfectly encapsulates how this armor bird is much better served in the region after its introduction, proving that sometimes all you need to do is wait for your big break. Number 3. Rotom. So this Pokemon is a fun little poltergeist, right? Wrong, at least in Diamond and Pearl. It is implied as it's possessing a television, but originally Rotom was stuck as the lovable scamp that we know him to be, and he didn't even have alternate forms until Platinum. And while that was a neat addition, he still didn't even change types. He would get a single new attack of those types, but he would firmly remain an electric and ghost Pokemon. It can be easy to forget that Rotom was indeed so limited in his native land, going from not great to even worse the further you go back. And it doesn't really help that you couldn't even find the thing in Diamond and Pearl until the National Dex. So that means that Rotom can only go up after its debut. So really you just kind of pick your poison as to which game you'd like to be represented on this list. You could always go with the Alola region, given that it has the Rotom Dex, which is pretty handy, and it even has power-ups in battle and free gifts and things. But I'd say that the Galar region is probably where this playful Plasma Ball shines the most. Firstly, there's the Rotom Phone that still functions as your Pokédex, but also has other new functions. You've also got the Rotom Bike that you can use to rapidly explore the wild area, or the DLCs if you bought those, and you can inexplicably also use it to surf. That is crazy that you rely on a Lightning Spectre of all things to get you across the water without electrocuting you, but Rotom also happens to inhabit every PC inside the Galar region to let you deal with your Pokemon and even send them away on jobs. And then they also fly around the stadiums recording all of the gym battles. But most importantly, you can actually find Rotom in the wild at a reasonable stage. He can often appear in thunderstorms where you can scoop one up pretty early in the game and use it to your heart's content, changing it to all kinds of forms and pretty much fixing every problem that it had in Gen 4. And since the Rotom Phone seems to be a staple in the series going forward, I can pretty confidently say that Rotom's best days are still ahead of him. Number 2. Hawlucha. I never really loved Hawlucha as much as other people do, mostly because I don't like wrestling all that much, but it was also kind of fumbled in Kalos by being so rare. Only found on one route, that being Route 10. Now, it is a 20% chance, which is a lot higher than some of these on the list. However, Route 10 is smaller than most others out there, and it's really just a short break in between the places that you're actually wanting to go, with large spots of no grass that you can easily hop between. So I wouldn't be surprised if many people never found a Hawlucha when it first showed up in Kalos. And that's most egregious because it would prevent people from utilizing the singular Pokemon attack that is two types simultaneously. However, Hawlucha still finds success on the 3DS just a little bit later in Alola. Not of course in Sun and Moon, but the wrestling Pokemon made a huge mark in the Ultra games. You can find this thing so incredibly early, almost disturbingly early, well before the first trial on Melee Island, which is great for multiple reasons. Once again, you have an ace up your sleeve for the normal type trial that comes up first, but even better is the fact that it easily outclasses everything else around it, having hundreds of extra points in its base stats compared to the usual early route fare. And many players often take to trading for one on the same route by simply giving up a common Spearow, providing a guaranteed way of getting a Hawlucha, and one that will level up much faster than one caught in the wild. So you can absolutely make much better use of the Condor Luchador in Ultra Sun and Moon than you ever could in its home Gen 6. You could argue that Rufflet gets this treatment too, but Hawlucha definitely gets the best out of this new lease on life. Number 1. Porygon. So Porygon is a neat idea, especially back in the 90s when computers were advancing exponentially. It was all the rage to think of creating a virtual life form. So I like the concept of this digital duck, but I have to wonder, why did they make it harder to collect than Mewtwo? Back in the first generation, the only way to acquire a Porygon was from the Rocket Game Corner. That's right, your one shot at getting this one-of-a-kind Pokemon is literally gambling. And it's not just a one-and-done thing, because for some reason, It costs 9,999 coins to redeem this prize. That means that instead of playing an actual Pokemon game of training monsters, you have to sit at a slot machine for hours on end, even though you can still lose the money. I respect what you stand for, Porygon, but I value my time too much to bother with any of that. And even if you did have no life and actually got a Porygon in Gen 1, it doesn't really make a difference because there are so many other better normal types to use in the first generation. There's pretty much nothing Porygon could do that one of these stronger candidates couldn't pull off better. So clearly Porygon is disadvantaged in just about every way in the original Kanto games. But that means good news since next time has to be an improvement, right? Gold and Silver won't exactly help you get over your gambling problem, but there is the whole evolution angle with Porygon 2. You could argue that provides a massive improvement, but honestly, I'm still torn on whether or not evolutions and forms help out that initial Pokemon or not. But luckily for us, Porygon does indeed benefit once the Eviolite comes out in Gen 5, buffing its defenses significantly. And then of course there's also the even further evolution, Porygon Z in Sinnoh, who is also pretty useful in a number of ways. But Sinnoh is a good place to bring up, because while it is still very rare, you can find a Porygon in the Trophy Garden, which is much easier than whiling away the hours at the casino. So getting hold of Porygon on a huge discount with the possibility of 2 evolutions is leagues above where we saw it in Kanto. And indeed, there are other options like Legends Arceus, which is pretty great with its distortion fields, and even Scarlet and Violet have their uses. Pretty much anything but the Alola region since you have to wait for a post-game gift. So Porygon is the very definition of getting a better shake outside of their home region. And it gives hope to overlooked Pokemon everywhere that one day they might actually improve if placed in the right environment. So those are the Pokemon that perform best outside of their native region. Which Pokemon do you prefer to use in altered locations? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.